Follow Deputy O'Keefe, Deputy Colm, Deputy
I've been
Keaveney.
kindly
5 minutes.
informed that I have 2 additional minutes from Deputy O'Keefe, with your permission. Minister, most of my adult life I paid for my water, so I value it as a resource, and I have no objection to the principle of paying for water. However, I am opposed to the Irish water model that the government have imposed on this country by legislation rammed through the Dáil at the latter end of the last session. I'm also a believer of the importance of local democracy and the principle of subsidiarity, and therefore I am opposed to the stripping of this function from the local authority, because I think that this action itself has created an issue of accountability for the public, and it certainly has damaged the perception of the acceptance of water charges across the country. Now, Minister, as Minister responsible for the New Era project, and I'm sure you'll agree with what I'm going to say, that in any venture of this scale, of this kind, public confidence and trust in the fairness and how it was set up is essential if popular support was to be secured from the people. However, recent events, in my view, have damaged the confidence that the public have in Irish water. Now, Minister, I have multiple concerns about this legislation and the implications of it, but I want to focus this evening on the tendering process for the treatment of wastewater. These concerns arise with me as a consequence of representations that have been made to my office over the course of the winter holidays, and they are quite disturbing. Minister, contractors who have contacted me were too nervous to contact government deputies about their concerns with respect to the success of the tendering process. And they have raised matters with me that they felt that they were unable to raise with the department or their local government deputies. Now, Minister, you may be aware of the multiple supplier framework provision of wastewater management, and it specifically laid out the conditions that would have had to be met by contractors who wished to tender to provide services. Those tendering services were clearly set out by the Environmental Impairment Liability Insurance Scheme and a motor insurance scheme to a maximum indemnity of €6.5 million. Minister, you know also that an online open and answer question section existed, and that the only means in which an applicant was permitted to submit a query was online. All tenders later had it clarified that the insurance would have to be in place first, prior to the tender being considered and the application being submitted. It's a fact that we can verify with documents. Minister, applicants had to incur considerable expense in putting together the insurance in place. Anything from 20 to 60,000 euro was required from financial institutions prior to Christmas in order to have the upfront cost of meeting the tender requirements. Minister, it's important for you to note this, that many contractors were put off at the outset from applying because of the upfront cost. Minister, you know the deadline for the tenders were to be submitted by the 29th of November. 2 weeks later, correspondence were received by contractors that confirmed that the insurance requirements had to be in place and that they had to revalidate that affirmation. Minister, then on the 18th of December, a communication was sent out that indicated that the requirement for the environmental impairment liability insurance was to be dropped. Furthermore, the maximum indemnity limit for the motor insurance was to be dropped from €6.5 million to €1.3 million. 4 days later after that, communications went out indicating who were the successful tenders to be designated for consideration. Now, Minister, I find this timeline quite curious, and I have a number of questions for you with respect to those decisions. Why were those changes made? Minister, you've heard the Latin phrase cui bono. Who benefited from those changes of the tender process? What company, which originally failed the original criteria, was subsequently successful following the changes that were made in Irish water? And Minister, could you tell the House how many potential tenders decided not to participate because of the onerous insurance requirements set out in December the 18th? How many of those contractors decided not to pursue with the tender process because they couldn't actually secure the capital to secure the insurance premiums. Now, Minister, I can't answer those contractors myself, but I can guess an outline answer for them. Minister, the likely beneficiaries of any change would probably be a company that relied entirely on subcontractors to provide their services. And in fact, originally they failed to satisfy the requirements of the tender. Minister, oddly enough, there is only one company that fulfills the nature of that characteristic. And coincidentally, Minister, one of its former managers is now responsible in Ernst & Young for the very tendering process that we are now discussing. Minister, you say about the critical importance of public trust. Public trust needs to be secured. I would be grateful, Minister, if you could answer tonight the oddity of that observation, that a consultant that has been provided for from the 50 million euro that's been bandied about is formerly of an operator who is uniquely in position to fulfill the criteria that was amended within that timeline, is now in fact the consultant who works in Ernst & Young who makes decisions on these contracts. Would you please make a comment to the House to that effect tonight?